Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome all of you gathered here for this public lecture organized by Mechanical Engineering Sectional Committee of Institute of Engineers, Sri Lanka. Today, we have organized a public lecture on unleashing the potential of people. So we have an award-winning HR executive, Mr. Sapumal Tipputoa, as today's presenter. Mr. Sapumal, stage is yours for the presentation.
Hello, good evening everyone. Thank you Randaka for the introduction. I actually told Randaka while he was trying to introduce me that I will introduce myself, which would be quite easier in terms of giving an introduction. Before I start, I'll tell a bit about me, who I am, what do I do, so that you will have a bit of a context into who I am, and it will be easier when it comes to question and answers, discussion, so on and so forth. So in the presentation, what I'm expecting is I actually put together a certain amount of slides when it comes to this specific topics, but if you do have questions, if you want to prompt a discussion, please feel free to speak up. It will help me as well as help others in terms of actually having a discussion around the topic, right? So as Randaka explained, my name is Sapumal. I actually work as the HR director for Fonterra, Thailand. So I'm actually based in Thailand, been working there for the past 7 months or so, and I am responsible for managing HR for Thailand and Myanmar. So that's my current role, and that's where I am at. I actually originally come from Kandy. I had my primary education in St. Anthony's College, Katugastota. Then for my A-levels, I went to Dharmaraja College, moved into Dharmaraja College. And I got selected to the Faculty of Engineering, University of Moratuwa, and was studying mechanical engineering. I actually am also with basically a batchmate of Gayanath who's here. He's the one who invited me for the lecture. So I graduated as a mechanical engineering graduate and directly moved into HR because of certain experiences that I have had, which I will kind of like explain you during my presentation. And my first job was as a management trainee for South Asia Gateway Terminal. Some of you guys might know the organization. South Asia Gateway Terminal is responsible for port operations in Colombo Port, except for Sri Lanka Ports Authority. They are the privatized part of the Colombo Port. So I started there as a management trainee in HR. Did also during my time did a learning and development manager role, that is also in HR, but I also did a technical inventory manager role where I could apply some of the mechanical engineering knowledge I have had. Thereafter I joined Unilever as a recruitment and employer branding specialist. That was in HR. And after another stint in Unilever, I moved to Dialog Asiata as an organization development manager. I was there for a short period of time and joined Fonterra as the HR manager until I moved to Thailand as the HR director for Thailand and Myanmar. So that's a bit about me in terms of who I am and what do I do. So we'll get into the presentation. Right. Okay, sure. Okay, so I will basically start off the topic. The topic that I'm gonna speak to you guys today is on unleashing potential of people. I know as an engineer, most of the people like structures, frameworks, so on and so forth. So if I talk about things in random, you guys probably will find it boring or irrelevant. So I have a philosophy. This is my own personal philosophy. This is nothing to do with Fontera, and this is something that I have been following. And part of the reason why I kind of like decided to move from an engineering career to HR career as well, right? So I'll take you through my philosophy and kind of like how I approach this, and this is the same principle that I apply when it comes to managing people. I apply this principle in terms of people, understanding them, what do they like to do, so on and so forth, right? So my philosophy is basically it's fivefold. First one is in terms of clarity of vision. I will speak about more in detail about clarity of vision, and most of the problem that I have come across when it comes to managing people is that most of the people have lack of ambition. They don't see anything beyond what they do right now. Right? I face this when it comes to interviews. You interview someone for a like finance executive or an engineering assistant type of role. When they come into interview, they perform well in the interview. You ask them what do they want to do in terms of a long term. How do you see yourself in 10 years, 15 years of time, which is like a typical interview question, and most of the people struggle in terms of answering the question. Yeah. So sometimes they would say, I would want to be a good citizen, I would want to be a good engineer, I want to be like a good manager, but nothing basically concrete comes out of it. So because of lack of clarity in terms of people, which has a huge barrier in terms of their development and for them actually to discover their potential. Purity of thoughts, I think in the current context, when people work in organizations, not only the organization itself, but people who are in the organization need to have thoughts which is pure, in other sense actually to do good to the world, right? Because we are actually in a era where we need to contribute to society, contribute to other people's development, because there's something that I believe that we are put on this earth basically to help others. So we have to do what we can, and when you do that, you tend to discover about yourself more. That's what I was referring to in terms of purity of thoughts. Machinery to deliver on the vision, you actually need to have a vision, a personal ambition, but you need to have certain equipment or machinery, I would say, to deliver on that. These machinery are not really the machinery that we would see in an engineering context, but what are those machineries that we can really enable people to deliver on what they want, right? Leadership and courage, although it's the fourth element, it's very, very important. I mean, we come across people in interviews, and even like when we go through their CVs, we usually ask them, how many leadership experiences that have you had? Maybe in university, maybe when you are studying in your school, or maybe outside, right? Most of the people do not have leadership experiences. They probably have only studies. They have not led a project, and have not done most of those things, and it becomes very challenging when we recruit them and when we expect them to lead, right? Because they have not had that prior experience, they have not had failures. It becomes challenging for us to expect people to lead, and most of the people are also confined into what they do. They know very little about the outside world, the other cultures, so on and so forth, and those are the type of people that we are increasingly looking at as multinationals, as different organizations. That's what we look at in terms of recruiting people into the organization. So that is a key element for us, and I believe if we put all these things in place, you could have different definitions in terms of defining these different things, depending on you as an individual, for your organization, so on and so forth. But if you do define them properly, I think there is a huge opportunity for us to enable people to unleash their potential. Okay, so I'll talk a bit about clarity of vision. I will tell you a bit about what do I mean by that. So most of these things that I speak, you might feel that there is no structure, there is no frameworks, mechanisms, so on and so forth. But if you want, you could ask me, and I could explain you what are those technical HR side of things, how we manage people, so on and so forth, and I could explain you more in detail. So in terms of, okay, so this is more of a question. Can you guys think of what is your childhood ambition? When you were a child, what do you want to be? When you were 7, when you know a bit about the world around you, what is it that you wanted to become? Anyone could tell me what you want to become? Okay, a doctor. Why did you want to become a doctor?
I think at that stage we have an idea of life.
Okay, all right, okay, so okay. Okay, so understood. I mean, like, probably it's you must have heard it from somewhere. You probably looked up to doctors, so on and so forth, right? So, for example, if I take an example of one of the famous golfers in our lifetime, Tiger Woods, right? Can you think what could have been Tiger Woods' ambition when he was a child? No idea. Okay. So Tiger Woods, when he was a child, his ambition was to beat his father in a game of golf, right? That's what he wanted to do. And why I wanted to say this is, when we were children, we had ambitions. We wanted to become someone. It's because that's based on the environment that we are part of, right? People that we see, people that we respect. So when I remember when my father is a police officer. So when I was a child, I wanted to be an inspector general of police, right? Because that's what I saw as the most amazing thing that you could ever achieve, right? So it depends on your environment. So the thing is, our ambition, although we don't talk about it, it's most of the time shaped by our environment. What is around us, the people that we associate, so on and so forth. So it's very important that that people have an ambition. And when it comes to HR, most of the things that we do individual development plans for our people, right? In our organization, everyone in our organization has an individual development plan for the next 1 year. What are those training programs that they have to attend? What are those networking sessions that they have to attend, so that they could develop themselves, right? Most of the time, the basis of this individual development plan is their ambition. So we ask them what is the next move that you like to have. So for example, they would say, I want to become senior manager in something, or we would ask them, what do you want to do in terms of long term, in 15 years, 10 years, what is it that you want to do, right? And we basically help people, be it in our organization or outside of our organization. We basically help them to achieve their ambition in a short run or a long run, right? Sometimes we have people who would say, well, I want to go out of the organization, start my own business that would compete with yours, right? But we still help them, yeah, because we know those are people with ambition, and if there are people with ambition, they are actually very productive people to the organization, yeah. So we most of the time ask them what your ambition is, and sometimes even right now we struggle giving clarity to that to people in terms of what is it that you really want to do in life, where do you want to go, what is it that you want to do, so on and so forth. But we also find people who are ambitious in organization, and from experience that I can tell you, people who has an ambition are very, very successful in terms of whatever they do. So ambition becomes like a critical role for us as well. So we do career discussions. Once a year we get together as the leadership team and we talk about each and every individual of the organization. We talk about their next move, what is it that they would do in the long run. Yeah, because we believe that a person in the same position shouldn't be there for more than 5 years, maximum 5 years. If they are there for more than 5 years, we kind of like think that they are going to get complacent or their productivity is going to go down because of that. That's something that we believe as an organization, and we try to give them different opportunities, be in their own function or any other function that they like to be a part of. That's why we need to know what they want to be, right? What is the ambition that they would want to have. So ambition, if they don't like something that they don't like to do, we wouldn't let them do it. Say for example, we have people who are in marketing who will go for sales, right? We have people in finance who would come to HR, do HR role. If you are not wired, if you don't want to do that as a part of your aspiration, we don't force them to do that, but we would always try to speak to them in order to understand what is the clarity that they want to bring in terms of ambition, right? And there is, I actually remember when I was part of, when I was studying engineering back in 2004, I actually joined the university in 2002. In 2004, I had the opportunity to go to a CIMA Global Leaders Summit, which was held in Colombo. I actually went to listen to Sangakkara, who was speaking at the seminar, but there was Imran Khan who was part of that. So actually he gave a very inspirational speech, and part of his speech he spoke about this concept called ambition, right? Having an ambition and what is it that you need to do to deliver on that ambition. And he said something that I wanted to share with you. He said in his speech, compromise anything for your ambition, but never compromise your ambition for anything else. Yeah. So that was actually the time when I was also a bit keen on engineering. See, I come from a background where my parents they decide what your future is, right? So for example, when I was small, me and my brother, actually both of us got graduated from University of Maratua. My father wanted us to become engineers, right? So he would take us to engineering exhibitions, bring us engineering books, and so on and so forth. So you naturally tend to incline towards engineering, and you think that's your way forward. But what happens is also when I came into Maratua, I got exposed to a lot of the things which is happening in the world, right? And I was also part of the student organization. I joined a student organization and started doing a HR role because there was no one to fill that role. Yeah, this student organization is, some of you might know, it's known as ISEC. It's an international student organization who provide development opportunities for undergraduates, right? So at the time I was in a dilemma whether I have to do engineering or HR when I graduate. And when I heard Imran Khan speaking about this, I thought when I graduate I'm going to start a HR career, right? So that was an inspiration for me at the time, and I just wanted to share with you guys on this. So Fonterra, we also have a purpose. We have ambition. Our ambition, Fonterra's ambition, is to be the world's most trusted source of dairy nutrition. Most of the organizations that I am part of, because I'm also driven a lot by ambition, I also look at, when I'm joining organizations, I look at organizations who are very ambitious and who are trying to do something good to the world, right? So those are the type of organizations that I would want to be a part of. When it comes to interviews, I always ask organizations what do they do, what is their purpose, what is their ambition, because when you are part of an organization who would like to do something big, naturally you also get that that experience as a part of your employment in that organization. So if there is if there is organizations who actually wanted to make a dent in the universe, those are the organizations that I would want to be a part of in terms of my personal journey. So why I wanted to share this is because I think in terms of people's career in future, will lot of the time depends on with the new generation who's coming in what these organizations do. Right, so there is organizations who are moving towards being very social responsible, having an impact in the world. So therefore, those organizations are what I would want to be a part of, and I think it's for the same with others as well. So my second element is in terms of what are the type of thoughts that you would want to have in terms of purity of thoughts. I want to touch a bit on this concept called passion. Right? I don't know whether you guys have come across this. Passion is kind of like the emotional element that we have. Like all of us are passionate about something. Either we are passionate about mechanical engineering, we are passionate about fluid dynamics, or we are passionate about social responsibility, we are passionate about developing people, we are passionate about something, right? But I think for most of the people, it's important that they find what their passion is truly. What are you really want to do? If you figure that out in terms of what you really want to do, I think most of the people are going to have a very meaningful life. There was this advertisement that I saw about Chrysler, which kind of like explains passion, right? So they say passion is such a strong emotion, it causes us to live, breathe and sweat our hearts out for things that we care about the most in life. For us in Chrysler, it's all about creating extraordinary cars, right? So this is an advertisement that they ran one of those successful advertisements in US that basically put Chrysler in the map in terms of connecting passion and what they are truly passionate about. So you guys in your organizations, when it comes to probably you guys manage people in your organizations, and it's important to find what your people's passions are. Some people are passionate about music, some people are passionate about extracurricular activities, so on and so forth, and that's how you build an emotional connection with your people. That's how you trigger, that's how you kind of like support your people in order to do something beyond work as usual and do something truly meaningful for what they believe in, what they truly care about. So you need to understand what your people truly care about, and do something about it, and that's something that we also do as a part of the organization that I'm part of. We have this concept called engagement. I don't know whether you guys have heard of it. Engagement is it's actually a derivative of productivity, right? So if you want to see how productive your employees are, we have this measurement called engagement. We run an engagement survey every year, right? Which is done by an organization called Gallup. It's a famous organization which has the survey has about 12 questions. We ask those 12 questions from people and take a numeric measurement in terms of their engagement levels. So the numeric measurement is out of 5. So we get 4 point something or 3 point something. Based on that, we compare that number to a global database. Yeah, because Gallup does surveys across the world. So right now they have done about 732 surveys across 20 million people. So that's a benchmark that we have. Also, we have those results of those organizations depending on your engagement level. There's also cultural nuances that comes in, cultural derivative that comes in, and it basically says this is your productivity level in an organization, and this could be an estimate. So what we all the time try to achieve, strive in terms of people is to increase those engagement levels. To increase those engagement levels, it's important that we emotionally connect with our people, right? Sometimes you probably had this experience where you kind of like respect someone in the organization, right? You say, for example, you respect your boss, but sometimes your boss is rude to you. Sometimes he or she gives you like not so much of a good performance rating, or like sometimes not a good salary increment. But if you have that emotional connection with your boss or with your line manager, you would still be a happy employee despite of whether you got an increment or not. My point is that's an emotional connection that you have towards your line manager. If you do have that, if you have emotional connection with your organization, line manager, so on and so forth, you tend to be happier. And if you are happier in a workplace, you tend to become more productive, because you think you are contributing to the organization as well as you are helping your line manager to be successful. So that's a measure that we currently do in terms of productivity. So it's quite a scientific approach. What we also do is, based on the results, we have engagement plans, sometimes for people or sometimes for departments. That engagement plan could be small things. It could be sometimes you would laugh at it, sometimes it's about going for a drink in the evening, sometimes taking on a trip, sometimes fixing something in the organization, or fixing a AC, fixing a carpet that basically bothers them, right? So we ask questions from them about materials and equipment. We ask them whether you have sufficient number of materials and equipment to do your job. We ask them, did someone at work talk about your development in the past 1 year, right? We ask them, did someone recognize you? Did someone say, job well done, you got recognized from somewhere, or something like that? And we ask them, more importantly, does your manager cares about you as a person, right? Apart from the job that you do, does your manager cares about you? So there are questions that we ask about career development, so on and so forth, which employees give a feedback to us. And if that score is low, we know that we have to develop in terms of material and equipment, or employees caring about, people managers caring about their employees or their development plans, so on and so forth. So based on that, it shapes our action plan for that year in order to help people be more happier, be more productive, whereas they could contribute to production and profit therefore. Okay. Before I go into the next part, is there any questions that you guys have up to now? Anything that you want to ask, questions, clarify? No? Okay. Yes.
Let me ask you, sir, how is the passion is created in your life?
Sorry.
How is the passion created in your life?
So basically, for me, I think it's when I was doing different things. I actually discovered my passion when I was in university. It was more in terms of when I was doing different things. It's more about what made me more happier. So it was an emotional feeling. Whenever I talk about people, help people in order to develop, so on and so forth, it made me happy. So I thought if I wanted to select a profession in the long run, I would rather select something that I would be happy in doing every day. So that's how I discovered my passion.
Can I give you a different viewpoint of
Sure.
Okay. Tim Collins says, right person, right place, right time.
Yeah.
Also, Tim Collins says, how passion is created in a person is finding the talents and serving through that talent, thereby you get the passion.
Sure.
Right. Abdul Picasso said, the purpose, the meaning of life is to find your gift or talent. The purpose of life is to give it away. Meaning, the whole purpose of life is to find our talents. And according to your talent, you choose your career. And Raycock says, if you work for money, you will not go anywhere. But if you love what you are doing, you will achieve success.
Sure.
So today, the talent management is talking about, as very correctly said, today parents or our colleagues or our teachers, they want us to become what they want. But instead, the true thing will come. Talent, when you work, when you find your talent and when you're working through your talent, no one can compete with the meaning. It's in your body, it's in your instinct.
Yeah.
So today, what I teach is people need to find their talent.
Yeah. Sure.
Talent or gift. And accordingly, to serve. As you very correctly said, I did engineering because my parents pushed me. But then, as I was doing engineering, I found that I don't have the talent. The talent comes from is a genetic coding.
Sure.
It's coming from your parents or grandparents. But then I found that my real talent was management and business.
Sure.
Because my father was a management person. So he was working on a company. And my mother's brother was a businessman. So those two have come to my system. So when I found this talent and started working, I became successful as a process.
Yeah, sure. No, like 100% agree in terms of what you said. I think there can't be a better explanation than that. And I kind of like agree with you. I think I have the same sentiments. I mean, when I was doing O levels, I actually wanted to be a doctor. But when I was, doing science, I figured out I'm not so good at it. So that's why I picked up in terms of deep maths, and it's the same thing that you're saying, sir, in terms of probably a different notion. But I think the sense is the same. So thank you for the.
You use the right word called wired. How we are wired is genetic code.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
today the evolution of human resources is not strategic management, is talent management.
Yeah.
Finding of people's talents, position according to the talent, and thereby your companies will go forward.
Sure. Thank you. All right. So I'll continue in terms of machinery. So in terms of machinery to deliver on the vision, I actually picked two examples. I mean, there is plenty of examples that you can find. One of those most common issue that we have right now, most of the organizations are struggling with this concept called millennials, right? So if I talk about my experience in Thailand, Thailand as a country has a less than 1% unemployment rate because it's an economic hub. There is so many job opportunities. There is so many multinationals which is present given the geographic location of Thailand. But if you look at market in terms of attrition, attrition as in employee turnover, percentage of employees who's kind of like leaving the organization, market rate is at about 26% across, right? Usually in a Sri Lankan context, most of the textile type of organization has a higher attrition, but not like FMCG companies. Like for example, Fonterra in Sri Lanka has about a 7% attrition across. So that's not so much. But if you actually look at people in Thailand, most of the millennials, they stay in a role for maybe 1 year, 2 years, sometimes 1.5 years or so. So when you come across people, you can't now tell them, because I used to do this earlier. I used to look at their CV and say, well, you are not a person who would stay in a same place for a long period of time. So I don't think I will recruit you, right? I understand that's kind of like discrimination, but that's the notion that we do in Sri Lanka most of the time. But in a Thailand context, that's not possible because out of the candidates that you get, about 95% of the people have that tendency in terms of moving around. Yeah. So you are not left with so much of a choice, right? Millennials also comes to organizations with lot of challenges. So millennials, there were surveys, this was done around the behaviors of millennials and most of the time they would like to work in an organization that does something good for the world, right? So there is increasingly organizations I hope you guys know that there is a big trend which is going on in terms of focusing on plastics, because plastics is a big issue that we have right now, right? These millennials are really passionate about joining organizations that basically works on doing good to the world, right? As well as if you take millennials, the way that obviously to that explanation in terms of how they are wired is different, because millennials basically have experienced things that we have not experienced. So they are part of technological advancement that has happened recent years, and therefore their behavior, so on and so forth, are quite different. So when it comes to work in terms of actually delivering things in an organization, millennials actually play a key role because of their technological advancements, because of those innovative type of thinking that they bring in. Therefore, the whole workspace is basically shaping, right? So right now we have policies that we tell people that you can work for 2 days a month at home, right? And we basically have a system where as a benefit we give them, you can work, do remote working for 20 days a year, right? Because these are people who demand flexibility, right? And when they come to the workspace, they would like there to be a billiard table, they would like there to be some bean bags, they would like a relaxed environment, and they would choose employers based on those facilities, and sometimes not really the benefits that we offer, right? Sometimes they would ask for flexible benefits. They will come to interviews and they will ask for flexible benefits. They would say, can I get an education assistance from you? I might not need a bonus, but can I get education assistance? So you would have people also coming in and ask for feedback. They would finish the interview and ask for feedback then and there. So the behavior patterns and the type of things that they demand, the things that they look for are changing rapidly. And I have experienced that in first hand, going from Sri Lanka to Thailand, because Thailand is more evolved in terms of those employment opportunities and benefits that is being provided. And even now we are looking at refurbishing the office space that we have. We have a traditional office space setup where there is desks and chairs, but now people are demanding in terms of plants inside the office, like workspace, phone booths for them to take calls, areas where they can interact with others, so on and so forth. So millennials are kind of like changing those dynamics in terms of how the organization would want to be. It depends on the success of an organization, depends on how early you catch that wave. Whether you would want to change with the changing world, or you would want to keep the organization as it is, but mold people the way that you want them to be, right? So your reward systems are changing most of the time, right? We have this policy in Thailand where you can donate your annual leave, right? So say for example, you are not a person who enjoys taking leave and traveling, so on and so forth. Actually, you can donate your annual leave to a fund. And people who would want more annual leave, they can basically get those annual leave from that fund and travel. Yeah. So it's kind of like changing, those dynamics changing rapidly. I understand some of you might think it's crazy. Why would you want to give up your annual leave, right? But there are people who does that as well, and there are people who would say. I know few of people, actually 3 people in the Thailand business. Part of their salary actually goes to a fund that helps underprivileged children, right? So in my payroll, I have to run my payroll for all the other people, but for those 3 people, I have to set out 5% off and basically transfer that money to a different fund where they basically contribute in terms of their salary. So now the organizations where we are moving is we are coming into a flexible benefit policy, right? So we would say, like when a person comes in, we would say this is your cost to company, right? Should I move back? Oh, sorry. Okay. So we would say this is your cost to company. Say for example, your cost to company per year is 10 million, right? 10 lakhs, hypothetically speaking, right? And we would give them a list of benefits that we provide, and we would ask them, what is it that you want? Do you want medical benefits? Do you want education benefits? Do you prefer to take the cash and go home, right? Depending on that, we have to adjust, because that's a way of keeping our people happy, as well as keeping our retention rates quite low. Yeah. So that's an area that we are increasingly getting into, in terms of actually really flexing our benefits and giving that to people in the way they would want to manage it. So there are people who want club membership. There are people who want us to sponsor their MBAs in a long run. Sometimes they want us to contribute to their insurance schemes for their parents, so on and so forth, right? So we do that, and therefore the Thailand business is actually more complex in terms of managing, because you have to manage a lot of benefits. It's not like paying out a bonus in December. You might have about 90% of your people who want a bonus, and there is 10% who doesn't want a bonus. They want that bonus sorry, invested for some other things. Okay. There is also another trend I would want to talk to you about. It's called winning balance, right? So if you look at the workplace right now, most of the workplace is basically male dominated, right? Most of the workplaces that we have in Sri Lanka, except for probably textile, most of them are basically male dominated, right? Most of the organizations that I used to work for had most of the time about a 70-30 split in terms of male and female population, 70% being male, right? But organizations are now increasingly pushing towards gender balance, right? They call this winning balance. Yeah. So it's also based on natural science. If you look at the example of nature always try to strike an equilibrium. Yeah. So if there is 50% of females in the world, there is also 50% of males. I mean, there could be times you would have about 57% of females and less males, but sorry, in the end it basically strikes an equilibrium. So with that concept, it also says that if you find out of that 50%, 10% of men who are brilliant, who are very intellectual, you will also find 10% of females who are intellectual as well, right? But when we recruit more men, which means that you are actually not capitalizing on that female talent that you have in the world, right? It's also when your organization basically reflects your external environment. Research have shown that your performance as an organization tend to increase more, because you know how an external environment thinks, right? So for an organization that I used to work for, we used to joke about it, right? So for example, even in Fonterra, the milk powder that we make, right, the choice is been most of the time made by females in terms of what to buy. It's been made by your wives, your mothers, so on and so forth, right? They would purchase it, right? And we have more male population who would decide what is best for females or what is females are going to buy, right? Which is not a great thing. So for example, most of the organizations that I have been part of, I have seen this scenario in terms of there is more male population. But now what is happening is organizations are pushing for it, and we as an organization on a quarterly basis report how our gender balance looks like. Yeah, so we try to be an equal opportunity employer. We try to recruit, have a more balance in terms of male and females also. It doesn't mean that we would find a less talented female just to replace a head count. But what we would do is we would try to find equally talented females. So because of this, we have lot of changes that we have done to the organization. Because what happens is biologically, I mean, when females are about 25 or 25 plus, they would want to get married, and at a certain age they would want to have kids, and with kids it becomes very difficult for them to work, right? Because they would want to take care of their kids and so on and so forth. So we as organizations, what we do is we have this flexibility approach. So one of the organizations that I work for, a multinational that I work for, had a vice president for Europe for skincare category, right? The person was actually her name went as Lisa May, right? So our email addresses goes as first name dot surname at the organization's name, right? But interestingly enough, this Lisa and May are not one person. They are two people. So they are actually two females, two mothers, right? They cannot work for 5 days for an organization, right? But this is a vice president role, right? So what they do is, the first person, Lisa, works on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, right? And May comes on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, right? Wednesday is the handover period. So they would kind of like update about each other. Both of them have the same phone number, they have the same email address, but those are two different people, right? And we also have, used to have this concept called career by choice, right? So if you are a mother, right, who would want to stay at home and work for an organization, you can actually apply for a job, and we would make arrangements for her to work from home. So we would never see her. She would work virtually. She would work in a home. We would provide a laptop, internet connection, so on and so forth. But we would pay her equitable pay. So for example, she wouldn't get a full pay in terms of a month, but whatever hours that she put in, she would get payment for that, right? And increasingly organizations are also making sure that mothers who have children would come to work, right? So they have these cribs, creche, that is been established in the workplace, where they can come and basically put the child to the creche and start working. It's in the same workplace, and that concept is now coming up more rapidly, because female employees are making their choices based on what facilities do they have in order to come for a workplace, right? So that dynamic is changing most of our workplaces, and the way we look at our people and how we would like to engage them, right? So therefore that dynamic is changing for us most of the time. So those are two elements that I basically wanted to pick up as a part of this conversation, but there are a lot of other things which is also happening in terms of in terms of initiatives as well, right? All of this is done to ensure that employees are engaged. We basically address those changing needs that people have. So truly we can actually contribute in terms of unleashing potential of people. So it depends on, even there are Sri Lankan organizations that I know have implemented some of these things, and they are going more towards implementing these things, and there would be flexi officers, so on and so forth. And because of the fact that even in Thailand, office space is very expensive, unlike probably in Sri Lanka is also getting there, and office space is very expensive. So we have defined for certain roles, we don't provide them a workstation, right? We tell them to work from home, work from a cafe, work from somewhere. They don't need to be in office, right? And there is also increasingly we have not in Fonterra Thailand, but in Fonterra New Zealand, we have hot desking, right? Hot desking is a concept where you don't have a permanent desk which has been allocated to you, right? You don't come into the permanent desk that you have near a window or like a very cool area in the office, but it's on a first come first serve basis, right? So you can go in, it's an open office space, you can grab any workstation that you want. When you plug in your laptop, your extension basically gets automatically updated, right? So you don't have a printed version of your extension, phone extension. It depends on where you are at that point of time, right? So that's an technological, that's an employment advancement that we have. Like for example, in Thailand last year, we got rid of all our landlines and we have given people mobile phones because we would want people to be mobile. We don't want people to be fixated on a permanent desk, so on and so forth. So we are using that technology. So for example, for business calls, we are using Skype for Business. Probably you guys must be using that as well. And we are encouraging people to be mobile, but to deliver on the objectives that we set for people. Right? So that increasingly goes towards in terms of actually changing the dynamics of HR. Therefore, HR landscape becomes very, very interesting. It's not like the traditional HR that probably we saw a few years back, where you probably find fault of people, ensure that you kind of like issue warning letters, so on and so forth with people. But now it's more in terms of how can we really engage people, how can we support them more, how can we really partner the business to actually help them deliver better. Yeah. Okay. So leadership and courage. In terms of leadership and courage, this is something that we are promoting as an organization as well. I don't know whether you guys find this as a challenge, but it's increasingly challenging to find people that we want for the jobs that we have, right? Sometimes we fall short. We cannot find people in the market. So most of the organizations, like about 2 of the organizations that I was part of, we used to run management training programs, right? When we open up management training programs, these are graduates who are new, fresh graduates, right? Who just passed out from university, right? So these are people who are sought after from universities who get highly paid. Sometimes they get paid, their first salary is more than 100,000, right? They could go up to 150,000 also, right? That's your first salary. And people compete for this. Undergraduates compete for this. So when we open up management training applications, you get about 3,000 applications, right? But you have only 5 positions that you will get people selected for, right? There's 5 vacancies that we are gonna select out of these 3,000 people. And shortlisting for candidates becomes very easy because one of the criteria that we have in terms of shortlisting is on leadership. It's not on leadership, but it's on habit of leadership, right? So if you go to Harvard MBA website, and if you look at criteria of getting selected to Harvard MBA, there are 3 criteria which has been listed, right? One is a habit of leadership. Second one is global citizenship, right? Third one is social responsibility. Yeah. So what is it that you have done around those 3 elements is what is going to get you selected for the Harvard MBA, right? Harvard MBA does cost about I think 110 lakhs per year. It's a 1.5 year program. It's an intensively competitive program where most of the people try to get selected for it. So if you get selected for the Harvard MBA, your next step is like a senior manager where you earn quite a sum, right? Probably in a big organization. So when we look at CVs, when we scan through CVs of our people, most of the people have an education qualification. Sometimes they are part of certain societies when they were schooling, right? But there is no proof of leadership, right? So it's very easy to reduce from a 3,000 to 150 just based on that criteria. Yeah, because people do not choose to lead. Yeah, and it's important when we take them on board, if they would want to be management trainees or leaders in future of our organization, we would like them to lead when they're young, right? When they start schooling, start university, so on and so forth. So part of the reason why we support most of these student organizations, which is part of in campus, it could be like, like Lion, it could be Lion Club, JCI, ISAC, anything, or Toastmasters, that we support those organizations, because those are the enablers who can actually give people that experience, right? I remember when I came to university, I couldn't actually speak English. I didn't know how to speak English. I hardly spoke, right? But I started speaking English because because I had that opportunity in terms of being a part of a student organization and actually practicing it. So that's when I started speaking in English, and I'm grateful for that. Coming from Kandy, I didn't have so much of opportunity to interact, and the usual language that I used to practice is Sinhalese, and there's not so much of encouragement for English also. So because of that, I'm grateful. So organizations are also increasingly supporting these student bodies, whatever the societies that are there, and whenever they invite us, we would like to go and speak to students, tell them about our experience as our employer branding strategy. So it's a strategy that we try to promote our organization, but also help Sri Lanka, and as well as help people to be better when they come out of university, that they would have more than just a degree, right? To be directly absorbed into a corporate environment and start performing, right? So therefore leadership becomes quite critical for us. Yeah. So I spoke about it. In terms of this concept called potential, we believe that everyone of our organization has potential. When we look at potential, we basically break that potential down into four models. So whenever we look at our individual, we would answer this question whether the individual has a potential to be higher, deeper, broader, or current, right? So for example, an individual who's higher has high level of leadership capability. These are the people who would come as an executive, grow up to be a manager, and even grow up to be a department head in their own organization structure, and probably go on to become a director, CEO in future, right? Deeper people are people who will develop deeper technical expertise, right? These are people who has high level of functional expertise, knows their engineering, knows their finance really well. These are people that we can't survive without, right? Those are the people that in an organization we would go for advice, technical advice, right? Those are the people that we call as deeper. There are people who are broader as in when we go and ask them what is your aspiration. If they are in engineering, they would say, I want to go to sales as my next role. Yeah. And that's something that is increasingly happening, and people are having cross-functional exposures, right? In future, for you to be a general manager, a director, right now we say in Fonterra at least you need to have 2 different functional exposures, right? If you want to be a sales director, you at least need to have a stint in marketing. You have to have a marketing experience. Or if you want to be a finance director, you have to have a sales experience. You have to have a commercial experience. Otherwise, you will not become a finance director, right? So this is something, a broader is something that we are pushing for. And current potential is actually people who are good in terms of doing what they do right now. We know that they are not going to grow beyond what their role is. But the mistake that we do most of the time is because we keep them in the same role for a long period of time, despite of whether they have higher, deeper or broader potential, they tend to stay current, right? So if you are in the same role for a long period of time, you wouldn't grow beyond that. Yeah. So what we most of the time do is we sit together, directors sit together on an annual basis, look at these buckets, ask from people what type of potential do you think you are demonstrating right now, right? and we calibrate that, categorize them, and then we try to understand how they would move. So say for example, if there's an individual that they want to move in 3 years, we will make plans to move that person in 3 years. Subsequently, there are changes which will happen in the organization. So we try to move people laterally, we will try to move people up, we would try to move people into a different country. Like the experience that I am having right now from Sri Lanka, I have moved to Thailand for a period of 2 years, right? So that's part of the exchange program that we are doing in order to give different cultural, functional exposure to people in terms of in different levels. Yeah. Okay. So last but not least, in terms of the world is my playground, but what I do personally believe is in my early years in university, I had the fortune of traveling to different countries, experiencing different cultures, so on and so forth. So because of that, I actually learned a lot, and that's also a concept that we follow in organizations in order to give cultural understanding, right? So if your organization to actually grow beyond what you have right now and to become a truly global organization, or if you are planning to move across geography, it's very important to understand how those nuances work in terms of how people actually perceive different cultures, right? So when I'm actually in Thailand, my personal experience is also, it's quite challenging to deal with them, because to understand them, it's very different, right? You think you know them, but you actually don't know them. Like for example, in Thailand, most of the time the communication doesn't happen vertically. So even if you ask them, is there anything wrong in the organization? Is there anything that they would improve? They don't say anything, right? Because they have the type of leadership experiences that they have is always to respect for the leader. So they wouldn't say anything upfront, right? So therefore, because your communication is not vertical, it goes horizontally, right? So there is a big gossip culture, right? So whenever something goes wrong, people gossip about it. Yeah, and that's kind of like you have to have informal channels to get to know what is going on, right? Because they wouldn't come and never tell you, oh, this is wrong, you should have done it this way. Whenever you ask, is this good, they would say it's good, and that's all what they get. But you wouldn't know until you have done a certain damage, and probably your relationship is damaged, your reputation in the organization is damaged, so on and so forth. So you need to be very, very careful, because it's a high context culture. And they say that you need to understand how to read the air. So it's mostly not what people say. If they say yes, sometimes their facial expression says no. So you need to, you cannot just look at a word and understand this is what they say. You have to, read their facial expressions, just understand how they operate, so on and so forth. And to build a trust with them, it takes a long period of time. So you coming from a different nationality, they wouldn't just jump and trust you, and it takes a long time for you to build that trust. So if you are in a different culture, if you're operating in a different context, it becomes really important, because it makes you more mature. It makes you have more empathy and kind of like understand that you have to respect those people in terms of those different nuances. So it becomes increasingly important. So it's good from even like young age. So when you are an undergraduate, for people to go through cultural understanding, cultural experience, so on and so forth. And I think that's also something when we were having discussions with University of Moratuwa Mechanical Engineering Department. That's what we were even promoting in order to have these modules around culture, in terms of understanding, for them to understand different cultures, so on and so forth. So I think that becomes a very integrated part of what we do as well. So that is about it I have for the presentation. I understand it's kind of like a short presentation. I don't actually know what your expectations are. Is that what you expect, or you expect something different? So I would want to probably do about a 20-minute Q&A if that is okay. and see whether we can kind of like build a discussion and see whether I could answer those questions.
Your presentation was based on although you are engineer.
Yeah.
Your presentation was assuming the HR role.
Yes.
This is for the benefit of most of the young engineers.
Sure.
Now, more and more the HR role is percolating down to the line managers. They should be the first level, line managers should be the HR managers.
Yes, sir.
But one, probably maybe the behavior or the way they are being framed, most of the time they use the left brain.
Yeah.
What would be your advice to see how they can get connected to their people, engage some of the things we covered, but
Yeah.
I think specifically we can say as line managers, these are the things that could be applicable to develop that bonding and the emotional connection that could be.
Yeah, sure. So that's something that actually we promote in an organization. Actually, I think Mr. Gamini, you actually spotted on the right issues that that we have. One of the biggest issues that we have in organization is line manager capability, right? So people manager capability is not even in engineering or technical field, but even in marketing, sales. That's one of the key challenges that we have. So in terms of line manager capability, what we most of the time tell them is to have coaching conversations with your people. Coaching conversations are conversations not to give solutions to your people, but spending time to listen to them and actually helping them to come up with solutions for challenges that they have, right? So most of the time engineers doesn't like to sit, including myself, doesn't like to sit in one place and have a conversation, right? Because they just want to get into something, get into work, so on and so forth. So what we basically tell as the first thing is, in order to have those coaching conversations with people. Secondly, we tell them that people managers to spend enough time in development discussions, right? Coming up with development plan for their people as well as performance discussions. That is what we promote most of the time. So if at the end of the year, when they have a performance rating, performance discussion, we would like them not only at the end of the year, but on a continuous basis to give them feedback in terms of how they are performing and what their expectations are. Also on a continuous basis, basically to help them to understand what are those development needs that they have, right? So we have a development plan for all our people, but that development plan changes most of the time, depending on the type of training program that you attend to, type of projects that you complete, type of exposure that you get. We change that development plan for people most of the time. So that's also something that we kind of like promote for our people. Third element that we promote is engagement. Engagement is actually around knowing your people better, just beyond work, and basically to figure out in your own style what is it that you can do to engage with your people, right? So for example, if you are a person who doesn't like to go out with people, I mean, us forcing them to go out or having more interactions with your team wouldn't work. So we encourage them most of the time to get together and figure out how can you have that emotional connection more, which is customized to you and you as a person in terms of individual. Sometimes probably going for a drink might work. Sometimes, you know, going on a team building activity might work. So there are different initiatives that you can actually have to do that. So probably that would be my answer to your question, Mr. Gandhi.
The second question is also you didn't touch on that.
Yeah.
Because I know it's a very weak game in Sri Lanka. How can you help the line managers to facilitate establishing performance measurement system? Because most of the organizations even they don't have the performance measurement.
Yeah, that's true also, Mr. Kamini. So one of the things that we does is, fortunately, all of the organizations that I have been part of had a good performance mechanism system. But your performance mechanism, most of the time, what we have seen is it is limited to a standard set of variables which we mark every year. So for example, we tend to mark people's performance based on, how is this person's communication skills, how is delivery, so on and so forth, which is printed already, and you mark on an annual basis just to figure out how the person's performance is. But if you actually connect your performance objectives that you are putting for people to your organization strategy, right? Say for example, if you have to deliver a 10 million project or 10 million sales in a particular year, how is that 10 million broken down into different people, right? How does HR play a role in terms of achieving that 10 million? How does sales play a role? How does a marketing play a role? So that you are, depending on how you deliver your targets, then accordingly your people will also get rated based on that, because it's fixed with how the organization is delivering, right? And you would see concrete outcomes in terms of, did marketing do well, did sales do well, did finance do well, because everyone has written objectives which is basically connected to their performance. So those are the type of elements that they have to follow and do on a particular year, so that they can actually deliver on those performance objectives. Like for example, in Fonterra, we have a strategy. All our performance objectives are cascaded down from the top. So for example, CEO sets the objective, that objectives breaks down into the directors breaks that objective down into individual employees. So when you actually collate all those objectives together, it basically that's basically the company overall objective that you would want to deliver. So we have a good cascading mechanism where we spend about a week on a particular year to ensure that we get it right. So depending on how individuals are performing, we know how the organization is progressing in terms of our targets.
I am Andrea, first language for your presentation. This one question, I remember you said that physical environment is more important for the performance. And you said that the current context that people like the place near flowers are there.
Yes.
So have you had some kind of scientific measurements that how the performance versus the environment?
Yeah.
And the most in this Sri Lankan countries, the people can going out, they just like to have some kind of cubicles.
Yes.
Rather than confined to a cubicle, how their potential is unleashed with the modern environment.
Yeah.
What are the international experiences that you have?
Sure. That's an interesting question. Actually, there is a science there is a separate science on how the workplace needs to be arranged. It's known as agile workplaces. There's this concept called agile workplaces. This agile workplaces concept actually comes from Google. Google is the first organization that has actually created agile workplaces. So how you create your agile workplaces depends on what is the type of organization you are and what are the type of things that you have to do. So for example, there is recommendations around how your meeting rooms needs to be. What is the minimum? It's also health and safety standards as well, in terms of what is the space that average space that an employee needs to have. What's the ideal distance between two departments which kind of like interacts with each other, right? What are those places that they need to have? Do they need to have thinking rooms? Do they need to have rooms where they take calls? So it depends on, there's not a fixed science, but there are guidelines which says this is how you need to do it. But those guidelines basically come from how you would operate as an organization, how your organization culture is, because your organization is quite different to another organization. It's probably different to Google. So even if we create the same environment that Google has in Fonterra, might not work. Yeah. In terms of cubicles also, I mean, there is people actually who's kind of like coming out of those cubicles, and even in our Thailand office, that's what we have done. We have had rooms for directors. We have come out of those rooms, sit with people, convert those rooms into meeting rooms. right? So if people want to have confidential discussions, that is where they goes to most of the time, or if they want to have meetings, so on and so forth. So we have more meeting rooms now than what we used to have earlier, and we have more connection to people as well. When you sit with people, you kind of like tend to understand how they behave. When you're away, probably when you're in a cubicle, you think that the culture out there, or the people that they behave, the way that they work is different, whereas it's actually very contradicting. Your assumptions and how they actually operate is quite different. So it's always good to be close to them, and even in Fonterra New Zealand office, even the CEO, Fonterra global CEO, doesn't have a separate desk. He doesn't have office. He just goes around in that particular morning and figure out where he needs to sit. So he is a person who leads 20,000 people globally, whereas he doesn't have a seat, permanent seat. So it depends on, it also depends on how you want to do change management. You have to, there is a step in terms of how you do it in agile workplaces also. It's known as education, communication and engagement. You need to educate people in terms of the concept. If you just do it, people will be like, people wouldn't accept the change, right? It's more to do with first education. You need to do that over a period of time to educate them. Then you need to communicate in terms of what are those changes coming, and so on and so forth, and actually engage them when you're actually changing something. You engage your employees, you engage your directors, actually get their buy-in to roll out that change. So that's what is happening in the world.
Yeah, I totally agree, because the open office concept is the way forward, and as you very correctly said, many directors have come out now. It's an open office. There are no cubicles, because when you get closer to people, when you sit with people, you can monitor them, you can direct them, you can do many things. Okay, so coming back to a few things. Okay, now you were saying the CEO goals is cascading down. Now, how do you measure the performance in your company? Do you have KPIs, and do you discuss KPIs, and then you measure, and then you reward? What is the method that you appraise people? Is that KPIs or any other?
So there is actually two parts to this. One is in terms of your job, right? You sign up for a job. Say for example, I join as a recruitment manager to an organization, right? I have to deliver KPIs on a daily basis, right? On top of that, because the organization is growing, organization has a separate plan to say this is how we grow, right? Those growth aspirations are basically being cascaded down. So I have two components for my role. I have to deliver my day-to-day KPIs, which is my standard job. On top of that, I need to contribute to the organizational ambition. So for the KPIs that I achieve, the job that I deliver, I get a salary. My bonus, my increment will be depending on how much do I contribute to the strategic growth ambitions of the organization. So that's where I get my bonus and the increment.
How will you measure those factors? If those factors are measurable, because anything measurable only will be achieved.
Yeah.
Those are measurable.
Yes, those are measurable. So what we do is we set the objective and we set a measurement. All the measurements that we have, we break that down into five levels, right? So for example, if you achieve that objective, you get a achieved rating for that objective. But if you go above or beyond, you get a higher rating, which basically gives you a higher outcome in terms of your performance rating, or it could go lower as well. So for example, if you deliver say 50% of the sales target, we would consider that as achieved hypothetically. If you deliver 40%, we would say substantially achieved, right?
So you rank accordingly.
Yeah.
So now Pareto says if you have 10 people under you, 2 people are really good, they are very efficient. There are out of 10, there are 6 average, there are 2 weak people.
Hmm.
You cannot change that. What do you do with the 2 weak people in your organization?
Well, we don't, to be honest, we don't believe that concept. We used to, but we used to do is we actually used to draw bell curves and force distribute people, right? And then came along NASA, who had a different concept. They said, we hire the best 10 scientists in the world. Tell us how you can draw a bell curve for that 10 astronauts, saying 2 are weak, 2 has exceptional performance, so on and so forth. So what we do right now is we tell them this is what we want to achieve. So people are also not with fear. Earlier, when we used to draw the bell curve and force distribute people, when there are 10 people who is working in a department, 2 of them know that, okay, if we don't do well, we are, even though if we do well, probably we will probably not get a good rating this time, because I don't know, we are not good with the boss or something like that. That forced them to be very individualistic, and we don't want people to be so individualistic. So what we do is we say, okay, this is your targets. If you deliver on the targets, that's very transparent. It's black and white. You achieve something, you get a result. You don't get force distribute, because we believe that 2 are exceptional and 2 are weak, and others need to be average. We used to do that. We are now moving away from that, and we believe it depends on how you deliver your objectives.
Also, you said your recruitment criteria weightage is given for leadership. Any other tools that you use, either old brain, colors like blue, yellow, green, and
so in terms of recruitment, when we recruit people, we recruit people based on competency frameworks. So we have a leadership competency framework which is common for everyone in the organization. It's based on a competency framework called Lominger. Lominger competency framework is actually done a research and have found out that there are 64 competencies, leadership competencies, which is relevant globally, right? So we have done a research for Fonterra, and we have found out that for Fonterra, out of that 64, only 23 is relevant based on how we operate. For Fonterra Sri Lanka, there are 12 competencies which is relevant. So when we interview people, we assess people versus those competencies, and based on the function that you are part of, you have separate competency framework. So if you are HR, you have a separate competency framework. If you are engineering, you have a separate competency framework. So I, based on the type of job that I do, I get selected based on leadership and functional competency framework assessment, and when I get on board, my development plan is based on those competency gaps that I have. Right? So it depends, it could be around training, it could be around coaching, so on and so forth. It's based on that. So my promotions are also based on that competency assessment. So I exactly know what I'm measured against when it comes to performance, when it comes to development, so on and so forth. So I actually can focus on those competencies and ensure that I demonstrate that more in the organization.
example, say I'm an engineer, I apply to your organization, and as an engineer, I don't have the real competencies, the real know-how, and but I have real leadership qualities.
Okay.
Will you recruit me?
Sure.
Then don't you think that you basically I'm coming, but I don't have the real ability to perform my engineering.
Understand.
Thereby, but I have the leadership.
Yeah.
So where will you?
It depends on the role in terms of what we are recruiting you for. But if the role that we require needs more leadership capability than technical capability, because we have had brilliant engineers in the past, might not know so much of technical capability, but has brilliant leadership capabilities. They know how to kind of like direct people, get the output that they want to. And these people have even gone to become engineering directors, or in some cases managing director of the organization also. So it depends on what is the level.
Position.
Yes. So if it is like probably a
low people, yes.
Yeah.
We will focus on more on the
yes, technical side.
capability, knowledge.
Yes, yes. Anything else?
So right now the HR role is going away from companies in the world.
Yes.
There won't be HR people in terms of that. And the line manager will be the HR.
Sure.
Your thoughts about it?
No, I completely agree. In terms of, I think HR role shouldn't be a standalone role. I think it needs to be integrated with people managers. I think in the future, what HR managers needs to do is focus more on people managers and develop their capabilities so that they could do the HR role on behalf as a part of their role. I think HR into the future will be more expertise type of a role, really helping the business to understand how they could partner the business better and provide expertise. And even right now, the number of people in HR department compared to probably 5 years ago or so are shrinking actually. There is a Dave Aldrich HR model that is being implemented right now, which has more HR partners than HR managers. There would be people who would actually partner the business, have business objectives in their performance objectives as well, and actually try to deliver business objectives. So I think in future it's mostly on that. And I mean, I actually didn't touch on today artificial intelligence in terms of robotics, which is coming into the workplace. With that, I think it's going to be the HR role would increasingly change in future in terms of how they operate.
Finally, what will you give as a takeaway keyword for us to become successful in our organization? What is your key? What is the one word that you can summarize yours, what you have achieved success in your organization as
Sure.
a person? What will you tell us?
So in terms of keyword, I think it basically boils down to something that I am also struggling to achieve. I think it's more in terms of emotional connection, how you can really be connected to people and how can you really create deeper stuff changes in human beings. I think that's what the notion is. I mean, we do all these fancy things in terms of HR, changing work environment, so on and so forth. But then again, it ultimately breaks down into how can you really create happy people who are really productive. And I think answer to that question lies with how good of an emotional connection that you can actually make. So I sometimes, because I have probably an analytical mind, I also struggle in terms of making that connection. That's also personally I'm trying to develop in myself. But I have seen people who does that and who kind of like, create wonders. I think that's also a sense of leadership. All these leaders that we kind of like look up to, respect, have created those emotional connections in people. So they don't have to be present, but probably their message, their connectivities that they create basically moves nations. So I think that's where we need to head as HR or as a professional. I think that's the solution. Correct.
So what you say is simple. We need to create and we need to make happy people in our organization. How you will achieve is emotional connection. That's what you want.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a very personal question?
Sure.
For being an HR person, if you do not have the HR, we call it a red, because people who likes people who love people, they want. If you do not have a real HR person, does not have a red quality. We have, as you know, we whole red. There are 4 colors.
Sure.
So if you don't have a red quality, then you being the engineering guy, analytical, coming into HR, how do you create emotional connection with people with the analytical, where you must be more or less a blue color, where analytical people come from? How are you looking at it?
To answer that question, I think it's mostly in terms of how do you see it. So for me, I think I carry a strength when I'm an engineer and I go and work in HR. I bring something to the table no other HR professional brings. I think that's my advantage in terms of being really unique. Because right now HR profession has been, I mean, if you can't do anything, let's go to HR because I can work with people. That's basically the notion that comes through. But I think it really boils down to, I mean, I have done engineering, probably I have an analytical brain, right? But I have friends, I have family, I have, relatives, and I have emotional connections with them. I think it's more in terms of if you really consider workplace as a workplace, okay, I'm here just to do my work, get my salary and get out. Probably I don't think we will break that barrier in terms of actually establishing an emotional connection. I don't think you being an engineer doesn't restrict you in terms of building emotional connections, but you are, like you said, you are wired in different way. You will figure out how you are, connecting with people. And we are in normal day-to-day life, we anyway connect with people. And that's what you also need to bring in terms of actually, probably you would put that effort in terms of really figuring out with a relative or your parent or someone like that in terms of actually connecting, but probably not at workplace. You probably might think, people might think it's less important to connect, but I think it's the same emotional connection that I'm talking about. Whatever you have with your parents, your relatives, you can actually bring that to the workplace. It depends on whether you care about people or not. So.
I saw a great human resource manager. He was a teacher who was teaching A-level in one of the schools, and he came into this HR. But his passion is to teach people.
Yeah.
But when I saw, he doesn't have, when we go on trips, parties, all those things, he is not available. His passion is not that. He doesn't have that passion to be with people, spend time with people, but his passion was to teach people. So the emotional connections were not there in him. Thereby, the real HR per se was lost. Is one example I will give.
Sure. So, could be. It depends on a number of scenarios. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Sapmal, thank you very much for that wonderful presentation, providing us a great insight on unleashing the potential of the global trends in unleashing the potential of people. I hope all of us, the things you have shared, the strategies, the ideas you have shared would be immensely important when we manage our projects effectively and efficiently. So in order to hand over the token of appreciation for today's presenter, I would like to invite Engineer Kamini Nandakunwardana to the stage. Now I would like to invite the chairman of the Mechanical Engineering Sectional Committee, Engineer Asel Patratna, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Rantika. First and foremost, on behalf of ISL, I want to thank Engineer Saumal Tibbatua for accepting our invitation and delivering today's lecture. Then I want to thank our Mechanical Engineering Sectional Committee Secretary, Engineer Gayanath Ratnayaka, for introducing Engineer Saumal for today's lecture. Then on behalf of Mechanical Engineering Sectional Committee, I want to thank ISL Secretariat for arranging, giving support for this today's valuable lecture. Then and finally, I want to thank all the invitees, guests, and all the people who attend today's lecture for this valuable lecture. Thank you very much, and good night.